They don't even want to call the government EPRDF. They want to call it Wayani or TPLF. That's it.
That was Dr. Weldu Weldeyesus. TPLF is one of the 4 ethnic-based parties that make up the ruling coalition in Ethiopia. TPLF is short for the Tigrayan People's Liberation Front. Here's Tedros Turfe speaking at the 2017 U.S. hearing on Ethiopia.
Good afternoon. Esteemed members of the Subcommittee on Africa, on behalf of the organization I represent, Amara Association of America, Ethiopian Americans across this country, and all Ethiopians who have suffered the unconscionable brutality at the hands of the Tigray People's Liberation Front, the ruling party of Ethiopia, Ethiopian government, the TPLF government mainly.
All of them are administering their own regions, their own people, with their own language, with their own state constitution. So there is no way that Tigrayans would exert any control over them. The Tigrayans are only administering themselves in Tigray. And when we look at the federal level, is that there are only 3 ministers out of the close to 30 ministerial positions in the country. The great majority of them are under Amhara and under the Oromo. So they are the ones who would be running the country. So how would this be brought to argue that there is Tigrayan dominance of all this? Within the EPRDF, the executive committee is composed of 36 people. Each political party sends 9 people. When we take the EPRDF council, each party contributes 45 people. No party has more or less. So in terms of voting, there would be no way that the TPLF would exercise greater control. So how on earth would it be possible for people to argue that there is a very strong TPLF domination or control of the Ethiopian government? Just it doesn't hold any water. In fact, it is strong rhetoric of the opposition, mainly the vocal diaspora, that has been misleading the mainstream media. They have taken control, and then they happen to convince not only ordinary people, but even leaders of various countries. They say that the Ethiopian government is under the control of TPLF, which is not true.
It's a complicated story, and you have to listen to all of it to get it, and then you may need some help.
That was Dr. Edmund Keller, and he couldn't have said that better. You have to watch and listen closely to understand what's going on here. Here's Deacon Yosef Tafari speaking to U.S. Representative Karen Bass at the 2017 U.S. hearing.
The history of TPLF, the PDRF, is woeful in terms of having to cooperate and work with any opposition group, with anyone.
Is there a dialogue that's taking place?
There is, but all we have to do is go back 40 years of their history to say how we see this type of dialogues would really come to a real fruition.
40 years ago. That's before TPLF came to power, back to its infant years.
Very, very smart cookies, these guys.
That's Dr. Paulos Milkias.
Because they are very small in number. They represented only 6% of the Ethiopian population. They fought against the Derg. When Mr. Mariam, the Derg had an army of 500,000. And these guys actually went from the schools. They never even had handled any guns. They started a guerrilla warfare like Mao Zedong did and Ho Chi Minh did and Che Guevara did, Castro did and so on. They started from their small numbers of students and ultimately succeeded to defeat all these groups. They defeated first the EDU, the Ethiopian Democratic Movement, led by right-wing pro-monarchist groups like the ones led by Ratman Deshatio, and they defeated the Marxist group called the EPRP, and then ultimately they defeated the Derg. It was the largest army in Africa, mind you. These were just small groups of people. They sacrificed maybe about 20,000 TPLF soldiers died in that war, but it's nothing when you consider the number of soldiers that died from the side of the Derg, but they succeeded to take over power. So whether they created enemies or not to themselves, they succeeded to control power. And it's not a very easy thing to do for anybody.
Here's former TPLF member Bassa Amari narrating how the party was formed. He says it all started with the student movement.
And this student movement have summarized their issues into three categories. Number one issue, as I said, was land to the tiller. The second question was democracy to the nation. The third was equal rights of nations and nationalities. The founders of the TPLF and other students who were active during the student movement were unable to push forward peacefully for the issues that they were trying to mobilize the Ethiopian people. So they departed from their peaceful movement and then mobilized their resources into armed struggle. The TNO was the Tigrayan National Organization, founded in 1974 on September after the military junta took power. It was not for armed struggle, it was a movement within the student circle. The TNO was the organizing factor, the mobilizer. But when the armed struggle was commenced, the name was changed into Tigray People's Liberation Front. The TNO dispatched two groups from its members, one to Eritrea to find the Eritrean liberation movements, seeking help, weapons and training. The other group into Western Tigray. 10 university students would go to Dedavit with 5 non-automatic weapons, and they would launch the armed struggle on February the 18th, 1975.
During this time, the EPRP was being defeated.
Then they started to go to the north. Where did they go? They went to Asimba, that is in Tigray, to create a guerrilla army. Now, at the same time, the TPLF was being created over there in Tigray, and they are Tigrayans, you see, their own territory, their own nationality, a nation. And then the EPRP started to have this grandiose idea about themselves, and they said, we are representing an ethnic group, one ethnic group, which is Tigray. We represent the rest, all of Ethiopia, and therefore you have to take orders from us. They said, oh, no way, we are not going to take orders from you. And that is how they fought. And then they destroyed them. The TPLF destroyed the EPRP in Asimba. And then after that, they destroyed the EDU, which was the right-wing monarchist group. That was the beginning of their strength over there.
The EPRP was formed way before the TPLF was founded. Perhaps about 6 years older than the TPLF. And it was formed outside of Ethiopia, which is still the product of the Ethiopian student movement. And the difference between them, the EPRP, Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Party, was a multi-party organization. But in its strategy, there were two differences that created with the TPLF. The TPLF's emphasis in the Ethiopian political assessment was the right of nations and nationalities to self-determination up to secession. The APRP believed the same thing, but the emphasis that the TPLF gave to the nations and nationalities' sovereignty was greater, and it counted as the number one problem in the Ethiopian political problem. The APRP, on the other hand, believed, well, if we run class struggle, the problem of repression of the nations and nationalities will be resolved through class struggle. We don't have to give much emphasis to it. Was their opinion, and the emphasis was on land reform, on land to the tiller, and other issues. So this was a major difference in these two groups. The second difference that they had was the TPLF's stand on protracted armed struggle was firm. The only way to win our objectives, said the TPLF, is through armed struggle, through protracted armed struggle that mobilizes, by mobilizing the peasantry, because the 90% of the Ethiopian population is a peasant. So we cannot have any other means, and we cannot get any democratic right or value from a military dictator. Therefore, the choice that we had at that time, believed the TPLF was armed struggle, but the APRP did not believe strictly on armed struggle. Rather, it is very much uncertain means of struggle was from the town centers, which the outcome had become devastating.
Now here's Dr. Welde Jesus on the creation of EPRDF.
37 members of the former EPRP created what was called EHIDEN, Ethiopian People a Democratic Movement, EPDN. So they approached TPLF and they said that they can have friendship with them and fight for the rights of the Ethiopian people. So the 37 former members of EPRP went to Tigray, and then the party was formally created in Tigray. And then they started to fight on their own in some parts of Amhara, and sometimes they were supported by TPLF fighters. Finally, they created EPRDF, and they were just fighting alongside each other. The OPDO was created by people who were members of the Ethiopian army, but captured by the TPLF and by the EPDM. These were the three choices that were given to prisoners of war. Would you like to go back to the Derg? Would you like to go to the Sudan overseas, or would you like to stay with us?
So why did TPLF allow their enemies to return to their camps? Here's Basra Amari.
Oh, well, look, this is a very excellent political choice. The enemy is now a friend. After we captured them, they're now a friend. They will be treated like human, not like the enemy with arms. They will be treated like a friend. And then after that, if we allow them to go back to the camp they used to, they will remain still friends. They will never be bitter enemy. I remember there were prisoners of war who were captured twice or three times. Voluntarily, they were not fighting back. So this was a very calculated and great job that the TPLF has done in its history.
And then there were a few members like Abadullah Gamada, the current Speaker of the House, like Kumada Meksa, one of the founders of PDO, who was mayor of the city of Addis Ababa and actually president of the Oromia National Regional State at one point, and a few others. They got together and then they said that they would like to create an Oromo party. And then The only time that they were involved in the battle was when the EPRDF was created, and then when they started to control the western parts of the present-day Oromia, in a place called Wolaga. They fought against the military government, and then they were involved in some battlefields which they called Operation Belusuma, Welkutuma, some of the last operations that the PRDF fought against the Derg. When it was created, it was made predominantly former prisoners of war, but there were also many others whom they managed to involve who were not involved in any war.
Northern Ethiopia experienced a famine in the 1980s that sparked a global outcry and prompted special attention from the U.S. Here's U.S. Representative Gerald Solomon speaking with Chester Crocker at the 1988 U.S. hearing on civil war and famine in Ethiopia.
The rebel groups up in Eritrea and in Tigray, they seem to be much stronger, and probably from a commitment, but I don't understand how they are getting so strong. Who's helping them? Where are they getting their help from? Militarily, weapons, guns, and what have you.
It's partly a function of their strength and partly a function of some disarray in government ranks, some demoralization that has led to this shift in the military picture in the north. It's a bit of both. And there have been, as I've said, ebbs and flows in the offensives, counteroffensives going back many years. It is our impression that the northern rebels arm themselves principally by living off the land, from captured equipment, and from resources they generate from amongst themselves. These are well-organized movements. They also get support from the Ethiopian exile community overseas, which is very numerous. As you know, many people have voted with their feet about Mengistu. And they've left. And they do support these movements. There have been in the past, and some no doubt continue, connections between these movements and the Soviets, some of their allies in the Warsaw Pact. There have been connections between these movements and some of the Arab states. But I wouldn't be inclined to say that most of their support is flowing in large amounts over any international borders. That is not our impression. A great deal of the strength comes from within the communities.
Here's Busra Amari on how TPLF gained military resources.
Basically, the TPLF got its own weapons from the enemy that fought. It got first from the Ethiopian Democratic Union, which they call it, the Ethiopian Feudals Organization. It had a long fight for over 2 years. TPLF won the contest and then got some weapons from there, and then the major weapons that included all types of weapons, tanks, artillery, and everything from the regime itself.
The notion that TPLF dominates EPRDF started before the party came to power. Here's Jonas Deresa speaking at the U.S. hearing in 1991.
Are they right to fear the EPRDF so much? After all, it claims to be in favor of a democratic form of government in which each of Ethiopia's many nationalities will be represented, in which human rights will be guaranteed. But what alarms people is that the organization is closely associated with the Tigray People's Liberation Front. It is this close identification with Tigrayan-speaking Ethiopians, who, including Eritreans, make up about 12% of the population that frightens other Ethiopians. They fear a new ruling class.
They rule together. But because of the fact that the TPLF was the one who actually fought the war and succeeded to overthrow the Derg, that power still stays in their hands. They control the army, for example, and the security and so on. So once you control those kinds of things, it's very hard to do much. But in terms of representation, they are all represented. You see, not only the Tigrayans, but the southern people, the Oromos, the Maras.
That was Dr. Milkias.
Ethiopia doesn't have a national army. It is the same ragtag guerrilla army that have been, thanks to the help of the United States aid and military assistance, have gotten to the point where it is now. It's one of the strongest army, but its allegiance is not to the nation. Its allegiance is to the political party.
That was Deacon Yosef Tafari. He isn't the only one making this claim. The Oromo Federalist Congress Party has this statement posted on its website, quote, "For the last 23 years, the Tigrayan army has been killing, torturing, raping, and arresting innocent members of our society for no reason other than their being Oromos," end quote. And here's a tweet from the executive director of the Oromia Media Network, Jarar Mohammed. Quote, "Agazi soldiers opened on crowd welcoming recently political prisoners, injuring at least 11 people," end quote.
In their intent, they are trying to use a kind of derogatory term. It's not only the Agazi, they also say Wayane Tor, the Wayane army. But there is no Wayane army. There is a federal army.
In a video on the government's handling of the Erecha festival, Human Rights Watch identifies protesters' chants targeting TPLF as anti-government chants.
The young man who got on stage began leading the crowd in anti-government chant. Once that happened, tensions increased and tear gas was fired.
The footage used for the video comes from two opposition media sites, Ethio Media and the Oromia Media Network.
Members of the opposition, they have always been using this name to refer to the Ethiopian army. TPLF in Tigraynya is Hizbawi Wayane Harnet Tigray. Hizbawi Wayane, that means the public revolt against oppression, against subjugation. The meaning of the word Wayane is no to subjugation, no to oppression. Actually, in Tigraynya is Hizbawi Wayane Harnet Tigray, but the Amharic speakers, they call it Wayane.
The largest number of soldiers in Ethiopia are the Amharas, and then Oromos, and then from other.
That was Dr. Johannes Gedamu.
When EPRDF is gone, the military stays there, because that's Ethiopia's military, right? And anyone would be proud of the military. That's what it should be. These kinds of armed conflict, talks of armed conflict could also get insensitive. And also, I think that comes from not understanding Ethiopian political culture and how tolerant it is. The TPLF, right, also, make no mistake, is a political party that has a huge support inside of Tigray. The Tigrayans believe in TPLF. And who are Tigrayans? They are Ethiopians, and they are not going to go away. I don't know what they think, but I think as an Ethiopian, right, they are going to stay there.
People can only argue that there is heavy presence in the army and intelligence, and there are historical reasons for that. They are the most experienced, and they have been in top leadership positions during the armed struggle, and then they have been instrumental in the creation of the modern army. But the great majority of them are already retired, and some of them will be retiring more and more. In the US, it takes between 25 to 30 years for somebody to become 4-star general. It takes 25 to 30 years. So you cannot bring somebody and then make him a 4-star general in less than 20 years. Even the military itself, it doesn't function as a haphazard manner. They have their own role, and the military officers cannot do outside their role of duty. If we call any force, it would be the police. Even the police, they don't belong to any political party. If it is a state, they belong to the state. If it is a city, they belong to the city. There is no way that they can say, use those kinds of things. But they are trying to use this as a way of defaming the Ethiopian army. It is true that the chief of the intelligence is from Tigray. He's originally from TPLF. The role of the intelligence might be even more important than the role of the army, but in terms of manpower, I would argue that even the intelligence has been more heterogeneous than the starred military officers in the army. But the role of the intelligence cannot be underestimated. But the point is, how would it be reflected in the regions? Because the role of the intelligence in the regions is more or less non-existent, because the regional governments are administering themselves. They have their own police force, they have their own intelligence for the region. So the role of the federal intelligence specifically on the regional states is very, very low.
The Oromos and the Somalis that used to live in peace with each other are now fighting on territory among them.
That's Dr. Milkias.
There are some who say this is a plan by the TPLF to actually bring the Oromos and the Somalis to fight against each other. I don't have any proof for that, and I don't believe in it, actually. But there are people who say that. They are the ones who actually foment them. Because the OPDO is, part and parcel of the EPRDF.
The tension in that region ended up in the death of and displacement of hundreds of thousands of people on the part of the Oromo, and then the retaliation was reflected in another area where more than 30 ethnic Somalis were killed. All these became a reason for the protest by the Oromos to continue at a larger scale. How would the EPRDF government do this? Because it's obvious, it is pretty clear that if any party is to do this, it will be against its interest. It would be against creating peace and stability in the region. But this is again another ugly, false propaganda waged against the ruling party and to some extent against the Ethiopian people and against the country. So the EPRDF cannot do something like this, which would backfire against itself. Just simple common sense.
It is like conspiratorial. I mean, nobody can bring a proof, but actually the image is out there. But I can actually put a case forward that actually can look like that.
That's Mohammed Olad. Before you hear what he has to say, I want to be clear that there's no credible evidence that TPLF or the Luya police are behind the violence in the Oromia and Somali regions. I decided to include this because it gives insight into how critics are connecting the violence in the region to TPLF.
So you have this new police force that are actually under the command of the regional government president, Abdi Mohamed Umar. And this regional government president has strong connections within the military security establishment. He's been propped up by all those powerful TPLF generals. Then that's when people are going to the conclusion, yes, if this violence has to do with Liu police and the Somali regional government and Somali regional president, actually this must have to be some plan concocted by TPLF to either win whatever inner party power struggle they're having with OBD, or maybe tarnish the image of those OBD officials, or maybe actually to create a security crisis that nothing in terms of political change would happen. Since like a year and a half from now, there has been like this ongoing power struggle within EPRDF for like more than 25 of the last 27 years. TPLF did have the upper hand within these fronts. So they were actually those who were setting the agenda and driving. And then the Oromia and Amhara protests started. There was a huge rift within EPRDF, the way to how to handle these protests and what would be the approach and response of the party and the Ethiopian government. And then within that context, then a new leadership came into power within OBDO that are more assertive and more confident than their previous leaders of the OBDO. So that created new power dynamics within EPRDF. And then the protests continued. And then those new charismatic, confident, assertive OBDO leadership started to side with the people. And then it created this whole vicious cycle of violence and those OBDO officials getting more popular by the day on the streets, and those TPLF and other members of the EPRDF party seeming like an old guard that actually want to keep the status quo and they actually want to hold back the country. So it is under this context that actually OPDO and their allies within EPRDF were actually pushing an agenda for change. So this change in terms of the way the business of the party is done resulted in the resignation of Prime Minister Hailemariam Desalegn in mid-February. And then that actually also created another level of power struggle within the party. And then the question became, who would gonna succeed? And then there were candidates that backed by TPLF and their allies, and there were also candidates backed by OBDO and their allies. So when people talk about Abdi Ilay and also Liu police force is being used by TPLF to massacre Oromos and things like that, they're talking about this power struggle. They're suggesting that TPLF are using Abdi Ilay and the special police force to actually wrangle some power and legitimacy from those OBDO leaders.
I don't put them that much stupid.
That's Basra Amari.
But in all the regions, there are conflicts in between people. It seems like a failed system.
Dr. Gedemu says TPLF also uses another tactic.
It's just by inciting like historical narratives of relationships between certain ethnic groups and who dominated one, right? Who persecuted one and the other. And so basically by discussing that again and again and telling that, okay, you have now these rights. You never had it before because of this neighbor of you or something like that. The Anole statue, that is very, 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 very much sought. That is designed to show that the Amhars somehow like caused some pain, right, against the Oromos, and to remember that, right, they had to basically show that and make a statue that shows, okay, this is what happened. So it's very, very, very sad, and this really is inciting violence, right? Spending, for example, 20 or so million per currency to build a statue of a hand holding a cut breast. And what would this kind of statues create to the minds of the Oromos? Think about that. We don't even have like clear explanation of what really happened all across this time. But think about the government having these kinds of statues. Memories are okay, like you honor people who may have been like killed by some injustice in the past and so on and so forth. I have spoken to Oromo historians who say this never happened. Or even if it happened, it's not by the Amhara. It happened by the Oromos themselves because the Amhara don't have this kind of culture and so on and so forth. I'm not a historian, so I really don't know much. But what I know is this is a very, very bad way of honoring whatever people that may have happened, some kind of atrocities. So it's just sad.
Generally speaking, in Ethiopia, there is no majority ethnic group.
That's Basra Amari.
When we say majority, it is 50 plus. But none of us constitute majority unless 2 or 3 ethnic groups join together.
A group of people felt they'd been so marginalized.
That's Deacon Yosef Tafari.
That they felt that they're going to fight to liberate themselves from the rest of the Ethiopian people.
The Tigrayan People's Liberation Front, the leaders of the Tigray People's Liberation Front, listen to what I'm saying, Liberation Front.
That's Dr. Ezekiel Gabisa.
That is for self-determination, that they would become liberated from Ethiopian dominance.
Tigray People's Liberation Front.
And that's Dr. Gedamu.
Tigrayan People's Liberation Front. Basically, there is liberation in the name of this political party's name. So basically, the name indicates that this political party wants to liberate Tigray, I don't know from where, right?
Well, liberation.
That's Basra Amari.
The name itself, liberation, is to be free from repression, to have sovereignty. I don't know what other name can be given other than liberation. It didn't say independence. Liberation has to be the proper name for a movement that you can run it within the larger picture of the country. It was for liberation, not for secession, not for independence.
Another big issue for opposition groups then and now was TPLF's support for Eritrean secession. Here's Professor Mesfin Woldemariam, Jonas Darasa, and Goshu Wolde speaking at the 1991 U.S. hearing.
People who talk of Amhara, whatever it means, Tigrayan rivalry, miss the real issue. There is no truth in the allegation that the opposition to EPRDF in Ethiopia and abroad is based on ethnic or language differences. It is rather their position on the Eritrean question that continues to generate opposition. They also fear that the EPDRF's support of the Eritrean People's Liberation Front's secessionist agenda will result in Eritrea splitting off from Ethiopia, perhaps taking Tigray along with it, tearing the country apart.
The conference also sent a signal and set the stage for Ethiopia's dismemberment through Eritrean secession. It was a blow, a dagger blow, aimed at the very heart of the integrity of the Ethiopian state system and a serious threat to the integrity of the African political order.
The EPLF fought in the name of Eritreans as a territory that was colonized first by Italians and second by the Ethiopians. We want its independence, okay? Just like many of the other African countries that became independent. That's the way the EPLF was fighting.
That was Dr. Milkias. EPLF is the acronym for the Eritrean People's Liberation Front.
So when Eritrea became free of the Italian colonial rule,
that's Dr. Welda Jesus.
It was under the British protectorate for some time. And then the Eritrean people were given the option whether they should function as a separate country on their own or whether they should be divided into, for example, some parts of Eritrea, especially the northwest part of Eritrea, would be given to Sudan. The southern parts of Ethiopia would be added to Ethiopia. But the third option was whether they would like to remain federated with Ethiopia. So the great majority of the Christian Highlanders, primarily, they voted for being federated with Ethiopia. So Eritrea functioned as a separate federal state under Ethiopia. But the Ethiopian emperor made, as historians say, a terrible mistake. Without any consultation of the Eritrean people, he cancelled the federation and he just treated Eritrea as a province of Ethiopia. So the Eritreans had to fight for 30 years in order to declare their independence in 1991 and to conduct a referendum and then become the 86% of the Eritreans preferred to be an independent country, so they became a country. So it was the forceful annexation of Eritrea to Ethiopia that was a reason for the armed struggle and eventually the secession of Eritrea from Ethiopia. In history, there is what is called main cause and immediate cause. The main cause was for Emperor Menelik to agree with the Italians and allow them to stay in the state of Eritrea and never cross the Marab River. So that was one of the main reasons for the creation of Eritrean nationalism. Because the argument is that if Eritrea was truly part of Ethiopia, why would the Ethiopian king negotiate with the Italians for them to occupy Eritrea and never cross the Marab River? That's one. Secondly, in 1896, you know that the Italians were defeated by the Ethiopian army under the leadership of Menelik II. And then, after the Italians were defeated, Emperor Menelik didn't pursue the war, didn't chase the Italians until they were completely evicted from Eritrea. So if Eritrea was part of Ethiopia, why was it that the Ethiopian king failed Eritrea again? Initially allowing the Italians to take control of Eritrea but never cross the Marab River. And second, after the Italians were defeated during the Battle of Adwa, why didn't he evict the Italians from the entire Eritrea? So our Eritrean brothers and sisters had a valid reason to argue that Ethiopian emperors just neglected them or didn't try to defend them.
It was for us, for the people who speak Tigrinya, it was by design. Amhara political elite will never agree with it, but the fact remains strong. And actually, it should not be the Amhara political elite as about unity with Ethiopia. It was the Tigrayans, if that was happening. They have nothing to do about it. The TPLF supported the secession of Eritrea because the Eritrean people needed it. They wanted it. They wanted to become independent. And they fought for it. And it was not the TPLF gave them their independence. They fought for it. They defeated a regime.
Critics have also accused TPLF of controlling resources and taking land to benefit Tigray. They say EPRDF is a vehicle for the party to accomplish this goal.
Any political group has the right to support, create, or consolidate that assumes to become its strategic or tactical ally. There is nothing wrong on it. The TPLF's constituency is Tigray. And to rule Ethiopia, you have to have friends, allies from the Oromo, from the Amhara, from the south. And to mobilize the resources, abilities to create or to consolidate likely friends is common thing. It is common. And it was the TPLF that initiated for the formation and consolidation of the OPDO. There's nothing wrong with it.
From the early days of its foundation, TPLF goals has been well documented. It is to break up Ethiopia's population by ethnic identity while simultaneously control all the nation's resources for the benefit of a single ethnic minority group.
That's Deacon Yosef Tefere speaking at a U.S. hearing in 2017.
Regarding the land, it is the land that was taken by previous governments from Tigray.
That's Dr. Wilde Jesus.
The places for themselves speak. They still bear Tigrinya names. Why would they have Tigrinya names? Why would the places have Tigrinya names if they were under Amhara? They have Tigrinya names because they were under Tigrinya-speaking people. And the people themselves, they are Tigrinya-speaking people.
The land has nothing to do with this. The land was not the center of this constitution. It was the people.
That's Basra Amari.
People who speak the same language has to be in one set, in one region. This is a point. And then, if there is anything done differently in Tigray, we can raise an issue. Oromo was done through this, the Amhara, the Afar, and all regions were charted through this idea. There is nothing extra or less done in Tigray. In terms of land, the region, I believe, Tigray has maybe lost more land than it gained. But it's not about land. It is about the right of people. People who speak the same language have to remain in one region. They have to speak their own language first. And after that, they can choose other Ethiopian language. But the TPLF, as an objective, never had the objectives of grabbing a land of other Ethiopians. That is silly. That would not work anyway.
In Ethiopia and Eritrea, you have got political parties that are parties of the ruling governments that actually run their own businesses, which is very unusual. That's the situation.
That was Dr. Milkias. The businesses are part of the Endowment Fund for the Rehabilitation of Tigray. Here's Busra Amari on the history of the Endowment Fund.
3 sources. Number 1 is money collected through fundraising from the Tigrayans themselves, mainly from those who are in diaspora. Second, it came through business. During the armed struggle, it was the TPLF had multiple corporations in Europe, the Middle East, including it was owning some ships, hotels, real estate, and the third is through operations that was getting. Of course, that was not significant, but from foreign aid, and this money was collected during the armed struggle. The branches of that endowment effort operates in Tigray, most of its branches, and then in some other Ethiopian regions. If it is in an Amhara region or Oromo region, this effort has invested in Amhara. If it invests, it has created jobs. So does in the Oromo, so does in Addis Ababa. It creates jobs. But the profit goes where? Where does this profit go? If it goes to the people of Tigray, that's originally their property, their assets, it deserves. But if this profit goes to corrupt people who control the power, that is a sad thing. But wherever it goes, it is an investment, it creates a job in Ethiopia. And for Ethiopia, this has an advantage. And the other opponents who believe that this should not happen, the TPLF or the people of Tigray should not have this wealth, then if we ask them, who do we have to give it to? They don't have an answer. We have to share it to all to the Ethiopian people. Do we have to turn it in to the government, to the federal government of Ethiopia, while we have in Tigray 100,000 handicapped people who do not have 2 eyes, two legs, broken spinal cord. If they replace this really to take care of everything, this money can be surrendered to the federal government. But this is not true. It should not happen that. Their question is wrong. It is a hate question, which they do not have any logical answer for that.
In any case, Dr. Milkias says he doesn't believe the party is exploiting other regions.
You see, people who actually say that to you have got a political axe to grind. Okay? Because you see, one thing that you can say, the ones who call the shot are the TPLF. That is what they say. And you can't take that away from them because they were the ones who fought and overthrew the Derg, really. But other than that, in terms of development, the development is going on throughout Ethiopia. That is my own observation.
So why did TPLF insist on the right of nations, nationalities, and people to secede? Here's Basra Amari.
When you read, when you identify and define a problem in a country, and when you carry a revolution, you have to have a good analysis of the country's political, economic, and societal situation. There was all types of repression. There was undemocratic rule, and the land was controlled and governed by few. For all these problems, you would need to have a solution in your platform, in your political program. There was all problems in its program. The land problem, the democracy to the nation, and including the most important and burning issue of all this that can disintegrate the country was the question of nations and nationalities. That was the worst. The Oromo were raised and armed, the Eritreans, the Somalis, the southern people, as many as 10 or more armed resistance were hatched during that time. And all were related to the issue of nationalities. In this situation, the assessment of the TPLF for the Ethiopian key problem and its solution was correct. If you don't resolve the issue of nations and nationalities, Ethiopia will go into disintegration.
The people of Tigray, they and TPLF as a political party contributed a lot to the creation of the present-day Ethiopia. And Ethiopia without Tigray, for me, is something which doesn't hold any grain. We cannot completely rule out if there is going to be a system that would make life bad for the people of a region, that the people of that region have the right to secede. Article 39 is important, not only for Tigray, but for any regional state.
But what about the so-called TPLF manifesto? I wasn't able to find an authentic copy of it, but critics point to it as proof of TPLF's plans to secede and build the Republic of Tigray. Basra Amari says the manifesto was created by the founding members, who were all about 22 years of age at the time. The idea was abandoned 6 months after the party was created, and he says TPLF's track record since that time refutes allegations that the party is still planning to secede.
Regarding the Republic of Tigray, Meles has nothing to do with it. First of all, he was not a leader. He cannot make any decision. There were 5 leaders. These leaders were Dr. Aragawi, at that time the chairman of the TPLF, Mr. Sirhat Naga, and Mr. Siyum Messan. They are all alive. Meles was nothing. He was not a leader. He was not with that leader's circle. So this is wrong. These were the people who made the decision. If they were to be blamed, these are the people to be blamed. Meles was out of that picture. He had never been a founding member of the TPLF.
So, members of the opposition especially the vocal diaspora. They are good at fabricating lies and circulating them. They are doing this deliberately. Other people who don't have any deep understanding, they do it due to misinformation. They are misinformed.
Here is U.S. Representative Chris Smith speaking at the U.S. hearing in 1991.
The April 6th announcement by the Mengistu's communist regime to oust all foreign relief organizations in Tigray and Eritrea, which now puts 2 to 3 million people at risk of starvation, brings additional dishonor and shame to an already discredited government. There continues to be, Mr. Chairman, reliable reports on the use of torture. There are thousands of political prisoners languishing in dirty cells, and other basic human rights common in democracy simply do not exist in this Marxist-Leninist state. Significantly and not surprisingly, more than 1 million Ethiopians have fled their country, the largest number of refugees in all of Africa. Over the past 2 years, it has become increasingly clear that the regime has shamelessly exacerbated the famine for selfish political objectives. He has used well-intentioned Western support to further suppress the people and to increase their misery and pain and suffering. Doctors Without Borders Director Dr. Ronnie Brauman revealed to the world in 1986 what now has become common knowledge, that Mengistu has, quote, massively misappropriated, close quote, the aid from the West, and that, quote, money, food, equipment intended for the starving has been hijacked by the authorities and used as a means of pressure on the anti-government people of Ethiopia's northern provinces.
Representative Chris Smith is currently working to pass resolution targeting EPRDF. Here's Chester Crocker speaking to U.S. Representative Gerald Solomon at the hearing.
I think several of us might want to have a crack at that specific question. We find that the private voluntary organizations, Congressman Solomon, have a rather unique capability to deliver. They're hands-on, they live in the country, they work in the rural areas, they are prepared to roll up their sleeves and to live in appalling conditions at great personal risk and sometimes personal sacrifice, which is not normally what is called for from international civil servants or U.S. diplomats, for that matter. And we owe them all a debt of gratitude, and they have a unique role to play. That would be my personal answer. I'd ask others who might want to address it.
Well, then how can Mengistu be opposed to that?
One can look at his decision in two lights. One, that he wants to bring down a curtain around northern Ethiopia so that he can do what he wants to do to the northern provinces of his country without anybody seeing it. And I must confess to you personally that was my first reaction when I heard about this decision, that he doesn't want anyone to see what's going on up there because it's going to be bloody.
Bloody? It's going to be genocide.
Yeah, okay, well, whatever words we want to use, that he doesn't want people from abroad seeing it because he's distrustful, he's paranoid, and he doesn't have the same priorities that we do. It's very different priorities. There is, of course, the explanation that's been given us that there is a war going on and he doesn't want the responsibility of foreigners getting caught up in a crossfire. And there may be something to that to a limited degree, but frankly, I think the first explanation is more important.
In the last few months before they were overthrown, they were concentrating on the Tigrayan-speaking people.
That's Dr. Milkias.
Because the TPLF was trained by the EPLF, the Eritrean Liberation Front, and they were both of them joining together. That's how the Derg was overthrown, because both of them joined together and worked together. And so because of that, Mengistu was actually going into basic things and was indirectly attacking the Tigrayan-speaking people, which is ridiculous, which I never believed in, and I don't believe in it at all. Because the Tigrayans are as good Ethiopians as any other group, Amaras, Oromos, or whatever. As a matter of fact, most of the wars that Ethiopia had to endure during the last, 2,000 years or so, where the brunt of it was actually carried by the Tigrayans. They fought for Ethiopia, no question about that. But there are some chauvinists, Ethiopians are chauvinists, who do not want to show them that way. And that was what Mengistu was trying to show. Because he was being defeated, he was saying, okay, even if they want to be independent, let them go. It's just like, this English saying, sour grapes. They were already in control of the north. Especially the TPLF had taken over the whole of Tigray, and they were expanding into Gondar and other places. The EPLF was actually moving out of Nakfa, and they had already occupied Massawa, which is a key, important area, and an outlet to the sea. So Mengistu had no choice, the Derg had no choice. So that is why it was a matter of crying sour grapes. So the power was getting out of their hands. So he was trying to attack the Tigrayans. The Tigrayan-speaking people have no natural resource. Okay, like Tigray, for example, is almost a desert. And if we left them on their own, they can't survive. See, that's what you're saying.
The Turk regarded the TPLF as bandits.
That's Busra Amari.
That was the main theme that he wanted to be known to the people. There are few bandits. These are, later on, he developed it into secessionist, anti-Ethiopia. Mainly it was, he claimed to be the TPLF to be outlaw bandit. This was his major propaganda campaign that he would try to defame or to attack the TPLF.
That seems to have stuck. Here's audio from the protest in Berlin.
TPLF! Stop! Stop! Cheating! Cheating! Ethiopians! Ethiopians!
And from the rally in Aurora, Colorado, led by Deacon Yosef Tafari.
And I want to make one more point, and that is, Congressman Hoffman, I want you to see our decorated flag, our national flag. It's a tricolor flag. These bandits that came down from the northern mountain has slapped a blue dirt on our flag, and we shall remove it.
Here's U.S. Representative Mervyn Donnelly questioning consultant Paul Henze at the 1991 U.S. hearing.
They're claiming in the streets of Ethiopia now that the interim government, which we supported through the London talks, did not reflect the population makeup of Ethiopia.
I don't find that very persuasive, and I think we need to reserve judgment on what's been happening in the streets of Addis Ababa in recent days.
What do you think is happening there?
I have a very strong suspicion that some leftover elements from the previous regime are deliberately carrying out spoiling operations, encouraging people to riot and to cause difficulties. I think there are others who've been misled. One of the sad results, and we saw it in Somalia in extreme form, of any authoritarian regime that stays in power over an extended period of time is that it causes enormous dissension within the population. It divides people up. People come to hate each other because of their tribal affiliation, their ethnic background, or their religion, or their regional associations. And it takes a long time to work that out of the system. We see it in Somalia in such extreme form, the country really, for the time being, can't be put back together. In Ethiopia, I think there's hope that the country can be put back together. It would be a mistake, I think, to do more than just listen briefly to some of the extreme complaints that we get. Furthermore, unfortunately, people who go into exile and live abroad for a long period of time frequently fall out of touch with what's going on in their home country and sometimes develop very rigid attitudes, and I'm afraid we see that in the Ethiopian exile communities at the present time. I think we should give all of these processes time to work themselves out and not get unduly excited. I think our government has handled the situation in Ethiopia, given all the problems that arose, in absolutely brilliant fashion. And I think it's really quite unfair to criticize and tragic to have young men out stoning the American embassy and attacking American reporters, as was done yesterday. But one hopes that those misguided actions will cease and that the people who are involved in them will see the wisdom of sitting down and talking rather than throwing stones.
I asked Busta Amari about that first day in the capital city.
Yeah, I do remember I was actually the first person to enter Addis Ababa. And after the control of the city, there were a protest, very small group of protest. And most of them were members of the Turk, cadres, party members, and then others not have any good information about the TPLF or misguided ones. And remember, the Derg had a lot of members, party members, cadres, supporters. It was not possible to persuade everybody, but for those people who had really a serious problem with the Derg regime, the very majority of the Ethiopian people were ready to listen to what the TPLF were saying.
The 1991 U.S. hearing included 3 testimonies from the opposition. The other 2 testimonies came from an Eritrean advocating for EPLF and for secession for Eritrea, and the other from an EPRDF supporter named Asefa Abraha. Here's what Asefa had to say.
Some individuals of the exiles in Washington find it difficult to accept the glorious victories of the people of Ethiopia over the tyrannical regime. It is ironic that rather than celebrate the fall of tyranny, some of the exiles are making frantic attempts to stir up conflicts among the various ethnic groups of Ethiopia. They have been making inflammatory rhetorics to foster ethnic division and animosity. It should be noted that some individuals of the exiles in Washington who are shedding crocodile tears were the very people who helped to design the tyrannical system and carry out its atrocities against the Ethiopian people and the country. If their actions and rhetorics are anything to go by, they must have been beneficiaries of the defunct tyrannical system. They are so desperate about the victories of the people that they claim so much through some of their mass pieces of press, such as that the Tigrayans are occupation forces, they are invading forces, and that they are a minority, etc. It would be against the democratic aspirations of the people of Ethiopia if the previous ruling elites, who came from a minority, should be replaced by another minority. When speaking of numbers, however, it should be remembered that much as they paid huge sacrifices to protect the independence of Ethiopia in the past, the people of Tigray have paid disproportionately immense sacrifice during the struggle to defeat the totalitarian regime. Having said that, it should be added that the people of Tigray aspire for peaceful and democratic resolution of the conflicts to bring about equality and progress. They want, together with their other Ethiopian compatriots, to build a democratic Ethiopia where everyone feels they belong there, where discrimination against nationality and religion is abolished once for all, and an Ethiopia where there will not be any second-class citizens anymore. What those individuals, exiles, claim and think, whatever they think, the popular democratic struggle has defeated the tyrannical system because the people not only supported but fully participated in it. The struggle has succeeded because it is an authentically democratic and popular struggle led by revolutionary democratic forces. What does one understand by unity in the Ethiopian context? Is it territorial or people's unity that one is talking about? Whose interest does unity serve? These questions must be seriously tackled. The issue of unity cannot be viewed in isolation from the democratic question. They are interrelated. If unity is to serve the interests of the people, it has to be brought about by themselves. Unity cannot be sustained by means of force. Thus, there is no difference between unity and democracy. The people expected democracy from the 1974 revolution. When the Derg took over power, the situation got from bad to worse. The suppression was more intensified. The policy of oppression continued unabated. Yet, the Derg continued with a slogan of unity and committed horrifying atrocities against the people in various areas of the country. However, unity did not come about. Instead, the struggle against oppression and for democracy got strengthened and spread throughout the country.
So if the question then is, if there is democracy, there is no reason why there will not be unity. Unity is mutual. People live in unity in order to serve their own interests and not to do favor to others. Unity can come about on the basis of mutual interest. If, on the other hand, oppression and coercion continues, there would not be unity and the country could be disintegrated.